back to Fearlyss and Unfiltered. On today's episode, we had the privilege of speaking to Dr. Kristi Reid-Partin. She is the owner of Revel, which focuses on the psychology of aesthetics. She also teaches at UT Austin and has a lot of experience in short-term rental ownership and boutique ownership. So she has been all over the map, both figuratively and literally. Her husband is in the military, so she's moved all over. And through this experience, she was able to share so many fun and practical tips with us on the psychology of aesthetics, how the design of your space can impact you and the consumer, how what you wear impacts you and the consumer, so on and so forth. So this is a great conversation, and I can't wait to dive right in.
Thank you for being here with us today, Kristi. I am so excited to chat with you because as I was getting to know a little bit more about you, I could see that there were so many different multifaceted pieces of you, yet it all seems like it comes together. Like I can see the string of how your career probably came to be, but I want to hear it from you just with everything you've done. Give us the high level version of when aesthetics became the focus of your career.
Well, I wish I could take credit and say that it was all by design. So I took a career aptitude test while I was at Auburn. And simultaneously, I found the degree for apparel merchandising and product development. And I actually didn't even go pick up my results. I went straight to that department and transferred in. And so as a lot of girls who were graduating college in 2008, 2009, I was going to move to LA and be best friends with Lauren Conrad and work at Vogue, and it was going to be great. So instead, I got married to someone who was in the military, and then we were immediately stationed in Germany. And after that, we moved to a really small town. And so I started seeing a pattern of like, okay, well, I can keep working these small retail jobs, or I can start to create my own path. And so that's when I decided to open my boutique. And I absolutely loved it. I loved the buying part, and I really loved styling and doing the photo shoots and everything like that. I went back to school because in my mind, I was going to be an instructor. And also have a physical location when we finally stopped moving and we got out of the military. And when I went to grad school, I quickly recognized that I really loved teaching. I graduated with my master's, and then I went back and got my PhD, which I was always terrified of, having to write a 200-page paper. But I did it. I survived. And through that, yes, I've continued to create my own opportunities, more so by accident than by design. We wanted a rental property because we wanted a place where our kids had like an anchor point. And I grew up in the Gulf Coast area. And so that's how that came about. And I recognized that after I was paying $35 for a light bulb, I wanted to take on the management of it myself. And so that's how I started doing that. And then the boutique was something that would carry with us, regardless of us having to move.
Mm.
And then going to school, when you're in your doctorate or when you're getting any type of graduate degree, you have to pick a path. And I chose social psychology and aesthetics.
So the boutique was online, right? And then you did this when you were in Germany.
Well, I'm sorry. So we bought our rental property when we lived in Germany. Then we moved back and we were being stationed in Washington. And in my mind, I was thinking Seattle, Tacoma. In reality, it was a tiny little town called Ellensburg on the east side of the Cascades, where the population's like 10,000 people or something. I don't know. It's adorable, but not really a thriving metropolis for fashion. And that's where I created the boutique. So I had the short-term rental property, and then I started the boutique. And that's also the place that I had my two oldest kids. And then we left there and we went to Kansas. My boutique really thrived there because we lived on base. And so I had just a collection of women around me that were, similar age and interest. And so it worked well there. And then we moved to Virginia. And Virginia also did pretty well, but I was starting to pick up on it's not as easy to move a business as you think it is, even if it's all online. So during this time, we were also upgrading with our rental property because when we were in Virginia, we had my third child. And that's when we realized, our small 1-bedroom, 2-bunk condo on the beach wasn't really going to fit us all anymore. So we finished out the aesthetics. Cost us less than $5,000. And we sold it for a 6-figure profit. We were able to take that money and get to a 2-bedroom. And so with each of the rental properties, I just began to notice a pattern of every time I would go in, and it doesn't have to be like a complete overhaul. It would be like paint and, new textiles and furnishings and such. I would significantly increase the rental revenue. And so ultimately we sold our last one. It was a 3-bedroom bath and it was right on the water. And it was like a corner unit. So it had gorgeous views of the water. But yeah, in around that time, I also decided when we moved back to Washington, lots of moves, sorry. That's when I decided that I really wanted to pursue getting my PhD and teach more than continue on with the boutique.
So as it stands, boutique you have since closed, and the rental properties, do you still own those, or have you moved on from that as well?
We have moved on from all of them apart from one. We still have our house in Tacoma, and I'm not sure I'll ever sell that house, to be honest. It's an adorable little cottage that we will never fit in because we are too many people and too many dogs. But it has a wood burning fireplace, and like it's built in the 50s, and it's a mile from the water, and it's adorable. So we have amazing renters in it right now. And so, yes, I've sold that, and now I'm creating Revel. So my joys out of having that boutique was really working with women and helping them like find their own style and not just be so dependent on trends. And so that's between that and the classes that I teach at UT Austin, it seems like a lot of people just have a lot of interest in that. And that's why I decided to create Revel.
Well, I love that. And I can't wait to hear more about Revel as we kind of walk down this path. But I am so stuck on the idea of aesthetics and psychology coming together. Just hearing you say even the portion of spending less than $5,000 to design something that then turned around for a 6-figure profit. I'm like looking around my house. I'm like, don't show her.
No. Oh, that's funny. I was like embarrassed by my very dated chair railing. This is a room I have not gotten to yet, but it was like the best lighting option. So here we are.
Yeah.
So
That is okay. No judgment of the background. I would love to hear, what are some things aesthetically that you have seen make a difference? And I'm asking because I feel like the people who listen to this podcast, one, we all want to enjoy our house and where we live, but there are business owners who have storefronts, or there are people who have online businesses where maybe like I'm looking behind me now, like the cluttered background might be a whole thing. So I feel like there are tips that you can give us on aesthetics and how they impact, one, how we feel about our space, and two, the buyer psychology, so to speak.
yeah. So if we look at it from a short-term rental property point of view, one of the things that you have to think about is like it's still a touch unsettling to go into someone else's house and sleep in a bed, right? Like there's still something a little like, it's an Airbnb. They probably don't live there, XYZ, but there's still something about it that's like, this is kind of weird. So what you need to do is that is a place that you do not want a high level of complexity. You do not want a high level of clutter because people's brains automatically go to, well, if there's that much happening, like how are they cleaning all that? Also having bedding that is lighter, because when we see something that is white, we automatically are like, you can look at it and tell it's clean or it's not. And so sometimes that can be counterintuitive for people because they're like, well, renters come in and they mess things up and they stain things and they don't treat your stuff nicely. And I have learned that that's simply not true. In fact, when you do have nicer things, your renters are much more likely to come in and treat your stuff with respect versus if you have a 1980s like pleather sofa that they're like, well, are they really going to notice this additional stain that I just left? Like there's a difference. So when you set an environment up, you're really communicating to your renters how you want them to interact with your stuff and interact with your place. And so when you have, I'm not saying you need to have your grandmother's china for them to use or anything, but when you do have, plates that match and glasses that match, things like that, it's in our brains, we're like, well, we don't want to break this because we don't want to be charged that additional fee, right? And so you really do start to communicate to others, like exactly how they need to act when they're in your space. So, another big thing is going to be color. Color is a huge one. And that doesn't mean that everything needs to be white, bright, and airy, because, if you walk into a log cabin in Colorado in the middle of the mountains, you're probably not expecting, a pretty seafoam green on the walls. Like you're expecting that kind of like darker, cozy aesthetic. And so the research that I did with my dissertation, it really confirmed for me, we all have an image in our mind of how a house in these various locations should look. So even if you've never been there, if I tell you, meet me in Bell, Colorado, there's still something about you that's going to envision probably like a bit of a log cabin, snow, a cozier vibe. It should have a fireplace. These various aspects of how a house should look in Bell, Colorado are going to come to your mind. And so what I just confirmed is really the closer that people can get to providing that for guests, the more likely they are to notice that rental unit and the more likely they are to want to book it and pay a higher price versus the units that might still look nice and they might still have a great aesthetic. But if they have hired a designer and the designer has kind of done a copy paste with every single, the bedding is the same, the furnishings are the same. And yes, they're nice, they're okay, but there's not a lot that's standing out because of the Instagramification, for lack of a better word, of how these short-term rental sites work now. People's eyes will miss. And so you really need to have a higher level of novelty or authenticity that's going to make someone want to stop and actually look and pay attention to what your unit has to offer.
Wheels are spinning right now because I'm thinking about my habits as the consumer. If I'm scrolling Airbnb, even just like on Airbnb, sometimes I just go on and make wish lists because that's what I don't know. That's what I do for fun. I like to travel, and it is a dream of mine to own a short term rental. But I really have this crazy thing in my mind where I want to make something themed. Like,
That is
I've
great.
seen in Orlando, for example, like I would pay so much more money for the Airbnb at Disney World that is themed after my kid's favorite movie than I would anything else.
Mm.
So thinking about what you're saying, I'm like, damn, this is a thing for all of us and we don't even know. It's so
Yeah.
simple. It's like mind blowing.
Yeah. And so, to add on, to give another example quickly, for people who own brick and mortar stores, the way you have the layout and the amount of items you have within that space also communicates several things to your customers. So it can communicate to them if you have a lot of stuff that your stuff is on the lower end and it's not of a higher price point. Then if you have stuff that is like if you own a boutique, for instance, and you have like one bag nicely displayed and you have shoes in places and there's space between all of these items, it can make such a significant difference because people feel calm and they feel like they have the ability to really look and see what you have. And so there's less complexity and more space equals this is going to be a higher price point.
Hmm.
Versus when you have racks that are very cluttered and they have, 50 shirts on them when they should have 15, then that communicates to a customer, like, this is going to be cheaper. Like, this is where their deals are within the store.
Yeah.
And lighting is going to be a huge one. And so it's just you don't really recognize it when you're walking around the store. Like, it's not like your brain is consciously telling you these things, but it's what's being subconsciously communicated to your customers that a lot of people don't realize.
So the average listener of this podcast is a service-based business owner, someone building a personal brand, whether they have an online business or an in-person business, that doesn't necessarily matter. But how would someone who is actively building a business use this knowledge of aesthetics to their advantage?
So one of the classes I get to teach is product development, and I love it because product development is the whole gamut. So it really is looking at the finished product, how you want it to be marketed, the price point you want it to be, the exact person you want to walk into a store or, look online and get your product. And then you have to work your way backwards from that. And so it is very much like, what are you trying to communicate about your product? Because if you want your product to be at a higher end price point, then you have to recognize, like, you don't want it to be a website where you go to it and you see big red sale signs everywhere and you're like 50% off, 30% off. Like, that's not communicating prestige. It's not communicating something that is going to be of a higher price point. And this is because if you look at how luxury brands are often marketed to us, they're marketed in a very whimsical way. It's very rare for you to look at a luxury brand and them actually even show you or explain to you what the product is. If you watch a perfume commercial, a lot of times it doesn't pop up until the end. And the whole time you're watching it, you're like, what's happening right now? It's lovely that flowers are floating from the sky, but where are these people? What are they doing? And so is it that? Are you trying to market luxury, or is it functional? Like, is it something that people actually need? And then you need to show them how you're actually using the product. Because design at its very core is communication. So everything from our cars to our computers to our cell phones, everything is telling us, it's communicating to us how we should interact with it. And so it's the exact same way with aesthetics when you walk into a store or when you go to somebody's website. They all are communicating to us how we should interact with the website, what the price points are going to be, if it's cluttered, if there's a lot happening. If people feel like if they have to search through things, then there's going to be a deal out of it, right? So, like, think about walking into a TJ Maxx versus walking into Coach. So a lot of times any type of designer bag, like when you walk in, they often have like one bag, like in an area, has its own little space, and you really have time to take each product in individually. Versus when you walk into a TJ Maxx, listen, if you can find a product immediately as soon as you walk in the door, like, mad props to you. You must have fantastic eyes. But most of the time you're having to like dig through racks. But on the other end of that would be you getting a pair of, yoga pants or even a bag for significantly cheaper than what you would normally pay. And so it's that same mindset that it carries over through really all products.
So now how does that affect how we dress? Because you said you study, the perception that people have of us and even that we have of ourselves when we are getting dressed. And I will also tell you, I changed like 3 times before we got on this podcast because I was like, I can't. First, I was just wearing a black shirt. And then I was like, I can't just go wearing a black shirt to this. And then I was like,
okay. We should have connected because I had on a black shirt and then I was like, I'm literally getting on a podcast to talk about aesthetics. So here we are with that. So I love this topic. So the entry point that I meant to start with was actually talking about how I grew up. My mom was a single mom. And so we didn't have a ton of money, but I have been called picky and not in a thoughtful way my entire life, and told that I was impossible to buy anything for. And so naturally, I wanted to have the same clothes that everybody else had, the same brands, etc. But while my mom did make it happen, naturally I had a lot less. So when I walked in my closet, there was less to choose from. So at an early age, I got pretty decent at like matching out things to make it look like I wasn't wearing the same things over and over and over. And so I think that that's part of where it came from. And that's how my love for aesthetics grew, because then people just started asking me, they're like, well, how do you do that? Because I look in your closet and, it's not like bursting at the seams. And even now, people get shocked to find out like I don't have a whole like winter, summer wardrobe. So a lot of it is really learning. And here's where people get stuck. People have to learn how to buy their style more than their taste. So people can have a very wide ranging set of items that they love, or that is their taste. Like they look at it on somebody else. You might look at it on your friend and be like, oh my gosh, that looks amazing. I want to buy that. But then you buy it and you're like, this is not, why did I buy this? What? No. And then it just is in your closet and you never wear it. And it's because it's your taste, but it's not your particular style. So there are two theories and they're pretty related. One is called dramaturgy and one is called role theory. And it's the idea that life is a stage and we all have different roles that we play. So like, I'm a mom, I'm a professor, I'm a yoga teacher, I am kind of a runner, but I'm really slow. That's a different story. So we have all of these roles that we play. But if I showed up to my class on campus wearing my yoga pants and a crop top, my students they're going to feel pretty awkward, right? Because like, did she get confused? And so when I'm dressing for my role as a professor, that is a very different look than when I'm dressing to go to yoga class.
Mhm.
And so when people begin to figure out what they want to communicate in each role, like what part of themselves they want to communicate, then you can really start to hone in on what look you have. What is your style? Like what is it that makes you feel the most like that version of you when you wear it? And so that plays on something called enclothed cognition. And so enclothed cognition was actually, there was a study by two researchers, Adam and Galinsky, in 2012. It's supposed to bring out qualities, is testing the qualities or the characteristics that someone needs to have in order to be a very good doctor. So in this test, they did it was randomized. So there were 3 groups. One group was told that the white coat was a doctor's coat. One group was told it was an artist's coat. And one group saw the jacket but never put it on. And then they were tested using this method, which is supposed to pull out the qualities of like being very detail oriented and also very fast acting. So like you have to pay attention to details and you also have to be quick with your moves and with your responses because you're a doctor. Or in some of their cases, an artist. So those who were told that it was a doctor's coat and they wore it performed significantly better on the test than those who did not, than those who were told it was an artist's coat or that they just saw it. And so there have been several studies since then that have looked at it from a different lens. But basically, what it's saying is like when you symbolically understand the meaning of something and you put it on, then it can bring out those characteristics within you. It can make them salient and stronger. And so I don't know if you've heard of the book Alter Ego by Todd Herman.
No, I have not.
It's a really interesting book. And so he talks about, it's very similar, but he talks about creating these alter egos. So how Beyonce is Sasha Fierce. In fact, I think he actually worked with Beyonce. and he wrote this book, and he talks about how you put on these different items and they can help you embody that character that you want to be. So, for instance, he wears glasses even though he doesn't need glasses. So, when he's trying to be professional and like really become that character, then he will put on glasses. And it is supposed to be like a talisman of sorts that helps train your brain. Like, okay, when I put these glasses on, then I need for these characters or this characteristic to come out in me because I need to do this. So, very similar to yoga, when I put on my yoga pants, then that is telling my brain, like, okay, it's time to go do vinyasa. Versus when I put on my heels and I walk into my classroom, that's telling my brain, okay, it's time to be a professor. And so it's about how the item makes you feel. And a lot of people get confused and they think that it's about how others perceive you. But the truth is like, I love wearing heels because I'm 5'1" and I just need any advantage to be able to see over the podium. But if you like hate heels and you feel like a giraffe in them, well, then that's not what you need to wear to show up and be that person. So you have to find your version of that. And so a lot of people just make the assumption that it's about what others perceive, and they forget that when you feel good, then you give off a better energy. And it's about how you feel and how you're showing up.
That's so true. There was a trend going around on social media a couple years ago, I think, and it was all women basically saying like, I do not dress for the opinions of men. Like, I'm much more concerned about what women think of
Oh, yeah.
my outfit. And it's almost like with every example you're giving, I'm tapping into my real life experiences. I'm thinking of like girls' night. Like sometimes I'm like, can we just please have a girls' night so I can wear the dress that I'm not going to wear anywhere else? Like, I need to tap into this version of me. And she's my favorite, but she never comes out because I'm wearing my sweater and my yoga pants right now. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? How do you think this shows up for people who aren't conscious of the fact that this makes a difference? Is there something that you see in your students or even in what you're building now, like the first thing that you teach people? Where do we start if we're not even aware of how this shows up for us?
So what I would say is, so aesthetics first started being studied in 1867, and it was one of the first things that was actually studied for experimental research. And we have physiological reactions to various aesthetics. And so if you can follow me back to the time when saber-toothed tigers were a thing and nomads were, also a thing. When you were out in the woods and you saw something in your peripheral vision, you had to very, very quickly decide, is that human I just saw friend or foe? Was that a saber-toothed tiger?
Mhm.
Do I need to run or am I okay? So that part of our brain has not, it's still there. Like it's still very
Yeah, I
much there.
feel that every day.
Yeah, exactly. It's why like we can read an email from someone and like, feel that rush of chemicals, going through our brain, through our body and, need to take some breaths. So it's still very much there, but a lot of people don't always notice that it's the aesthetics of an environment or even of a person that they are picking up on.
Mm-hmm.
So, how quickly do you think we form an impression of someone?
Gosh, I mean, before we're even aware of the impression, I think we've formed it. So milliseconds, I don't know.
Right? Yeah. So, on average, we have already formed an impression of someone in under 7 seconds. Most of the time, it's in 1/10 of a second. We pick up on cues like hygiene, their posture, what shoes they're wearing, how dated their clothes are that they are wearing, all of these different things about someone's appearance. And it's called dress, actually, in the course that I teach. And so, dress includes everything from how you style your hair to the piercings you have, the tattoos you have, the makeup, whether you're wearing it or not. All of these different things communicate to people something about you. And so that's why people can be so quick to make judgments. Truly, your outfit is speaking before you ever even open your mouth. Like, it can take over the conversation really quick. And so if someone has already made a decision about you, sometimes it can not even matter what you're speaking about because they have already formed their impression. Then depending on if it's good or bad, like, we have to manage that impression. And so when it comes to spaces, we do the same thing. Let's talk about like the short-term rentals again. So when we have a short-term rental and we're walking into it for the first time, we are in an unknown environment. And that's when we are having to kind of, we are just more on edge and we're trying to figure out like, is this safe? Does this feel safe? Does it feel comfortable or does it not? And then when there's a high sense of novelty or it's very, very different than what our normal house would be like, then that's when we can kind of take a little bit longer to find our place of comfort. But then on the same token, you also don't want it to be so much like your own house that somebody feels like they are physically sleeping like in somebody else's house. So it's an interesting balance that you have to walk. And there are elements and principles of design, and they're actually universal, but everyone's threshold of what they can handle in terms of novelty and complexity and how much familiarity they need is drastically different. And so just like how you were saying you would love to go to Disney and, be in a place that mimics your kid's favorite movie, like for other people, if they've never seen that, then that actually might detract them from wanting to stay there because it's too novel for them. Like they haven't been exposed to it often.
Right.
And so as owners of these short-term rentals, you really have to figure out like what line do you want to walk? Who do you want your, perfect renter to be? And then you can base a lot of your decisions on that because maybe you do only want people that absolutely love Frozen. And if they don't love Frozen, you don't want to rent to them.
Oh, this question might be counterintuitive because you said that we should dress for ourselves or design for ourselves and our threshold, what we like. But I'm curious, is there anything that we do or don't do that without a doubt is going to impact the way someone views us?
So let's use a job interview, for example. So if you're going on a job interview and it is a place that you can't really see yourself dressing how they dress every day, then that might need to tell you in and of itself that that's probably not the place for you. Because if you dress too outside of your comfort zone, you are going to communicate that. Like that is going to be the energy that you embody and that you are sending off to the people around you. Now, on the opposite side, staying too much in our comfort zone is also kind of a bad thing. So I remember after my daughter was born, she's my oldest, and I walked into my closet. I had to get ready for newborn photos, and I sat in the closet and started crying. Not just because nothing fit, which it didn't, but because I had nothing that in my brain felt like it communicated I was a mom. And so I didn't know what to wear. And even to this day, I'm not going to lie, I still hate those photos because of what I was wearing. But so we do have to recognize when transitions are coming and when we do need to grow with are like the person that we are becoming. And it doesn't have to be a huge transition like having a baby, but we as people are always evolving. And so when we start walking into our closet and we're like, "Ugh, I don't have anything to wear," then that might be a sign of like, hey, you're kind of transitioning out of this 20 something and into the 30 something year old mom. And when you don't take inventory of that, then that's when you end up in yoga pants and your favorite t-shirt for a decade. And then you're like, I teach aesthetics and I have no clothes to wear. Because that also very much happened to me. And so I think you have to find what steps are you willing to take? Like how much outside of your comfort zone are you willing to step versus like having to jump all in or not at all. Like it doesn't have to be so, black or white, especially when it comes to our wardrobe. But I think the biggest thing is like always just finding out who you authentically are. And that's what you want to communicate, because it doesn't matter how nice something looks on you. If you don't feel comfortable in it, then you send off that energy.
That makes so much sense. So is this the basis of what you're teaching at Rebel?
Yes, a bit. It's it's kind of like what we were saying before. Like a lot of people who they are under the impression that aesthetics is not important or it's something that they don't notice. So when I did my dissertation study, even people who rated lower on that scale of aesthetics being significantly important to them, they still were willing to pay a higher price, and they had a higher intention to book a place that had a higher sense of authenticity and novelty versus the place that didn't. And so even if we're not like consciously aware that they matter to us, they actually do. And so for Revel, I really just I want to bring back why it's important and for people to understand that aesthetics is not just superficial. You feeling good in your own skin, you feeling good in what you're wearing, you feeling good about your environment. All of these things are extremely important because they make you actually physically and mentally feel better and feel good. And so that's really the root of what I want to do at Rebel.
So if someone is listening to this and they're like, wait, I feel attacked because I did not pay attention and now I know that this is important, how do they go about working with you or learning from you?
I'm working on my website and maybe saying a lot of four-letter words as I try and build my website from the back end. I am creating a free class, free webinar. I'm not asking anyone to sign up for it. It's really kind of practice, but I am going to be talking about the social psychology of dress and how it impacts us and the different theories that we kind of use on a daily basis without realizing it, and how we can actually um, if we understand them better, we can use them to our advantage. And so that class is at the beginning of January on the, I think I have it booked for the 10th. And so I can also send you information on that as well.
Yes, that's so fun. I will definitely link that. I can think of so many people just from the business community that I know who would love to learn more about that, myself included. So I think that is really fun what you're doing, and I can't wait to see it grow. I'm definitely going to go into my closet as soon as we hang up and start making piles of what's what. But
Ask yourself, would you buy this again? I'm like, if I walked into a store and had to buy this, would I buy it and would I pay full price for it? And if the answer is no, then it goes into a pile. You don't have to get rid of all of it at once, but put it in a pile. And then within that pile, there's the definitely get rid of. There's that I'm going to keep until I can replace it. And there's the I'm going to sit on this for a little bit longer, but get it out of your closet because it's amazing when you have a lot of space in your closet to actually see your stuff. It makes getting dressed a lot faster.
okay. Okay, challenge accepted. And as you were saying that, I watched UPS pull up with my fashion pass rental, which is something that just brings me so much joy, picking out my clothes and then sending them back and getting to wear different things. But now I'm like, oh gosh, okay, I need this capsule wardrobe. I guess I can do this. I will try to be an adult. And I'll send you some pictures and you can tell me whether I suck or not.
No, I'm sure you're fantastic. Love it. I'm excited.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Before we wrap up, I like to ask people this question because this is the first question I ask my clients when I'm working with them. And from a personal branding standpoint, I always talk to people about who they are, not in terms of their job title or, being a mom or anything like that. I ask people, what are 3 words you would use to describe you? And I think that there's a parallel here because these words can also come across in how we're getting dressed or how we design our space. So to wrap us up here, I would love to know the 3 words you would use to describe yourself.
I was doing my homework because I'm a professor, and I was
Mhm.
listening to your podcast as I was getting ready. And I've been thinking, what are my 3 words since then?
I gave myself away. Dang.
No, I think it made it worse because I think if I had been, more on point with it, then it would have been easier. And so I am going with bold, sincere, and refined.
I love that. No, I think that bold and refined you don't typically hear together, but you say those words and I have an image in my mind. I love that. Those are good. Those are great words. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for everything you taught us today. I certainly learned a lot about, again, the things that we see every day and feel every day and don't necessarily pick up on unless we're aware of how it's triggering us. So
Yeah.
that was a very fun conversation. Thank you.
And I love your background, by the way. I really do, especially the dark paint with a tree. Love it.